This week, we got a flashback that many people pointed out that we probably should have gotten like a year ago this time. But, despite the fact that, yeah, that's completely true, I actually really fucking loved this episode. First up, am I the only one who noticed that there are episodes that very much feel like there's very little oversight from the studio controlling bean counters that run this show in the director's place? Like, there's these moments where you're just like, wow, this actually has emotion and character development and fun. You know, things you want in a story. Yeah, it's just something I've kind of noticed, and this felt like that, because there's a lot of very artistic things, there's a lot of clever animation things going on, a lot of good story things that we are now going to talk about in this week's edition of We're Going to Ignore Everything Else and Assume Everything is Fine in Yugioh Vrains. So, first up, how do we open up? We open up with Naoki talking to Yusaku, being like, gotta talk to you about your secret there, shark-finned head. Okay, I'm paraphrasing a little. But nah, he's just like, I know you've got a secret. And we get one other scene of it, which is weird. That kind of felt like they just kind of needed to maybe pad things out a little bit, set things up for later. But I like that whole sort of kind of half goofiness to it. Like, it's serious, because if Naoki has something on Yusaku, it can be a big deal. But let's be real here, he probably doesn't, and it's probably going to turn out to be something kind of goofy, or maybe he's being manipulated by Emma, who knows. Personally, my two hopes are that he thinks that Yusaku is either interested in Aoi or is dating Aoi, and I think it could be something like that because a lot of characters, besides our two most important for this sort of relationship, seem to always go to that sort of very, well, maybe they could be a couple, or Yusaku can't talk to girls. It always seems to go in that direction, so I think it would be funny if we just get very self-aware with it and have Naoki sort of think that. Or option two, and I think this is what we're all thinking, and I think this is what we all would assume if we were in Naoki's situation. Yusaku, Homura, and Kusanagi are having all-night sex parties in a hot dog truck. I know that sounds insane, but let's look at what's going on in this show. To a normal person, that's what all this must seem like. They even have their own closets. Yeah, that one's, it's probably not that. But no, that looks cute. Then moving on to I Flying. I actually completely forgot he did that. He put a hoverboard, or not a hoverboard, a drone equipment inside Yusaku's dual disc. I don't know why, I just loved it. I can do no wrong for me, so this just worked. It was fun, it was goofy, and then when he runs into flame... Oh, and I love the idea that Kusanagi wants to use him as an advertisement. That was funny. And then I love it when he hits Homura and Flame, and Flame is all like, what we need is an engine and wheels. I would watch the reboot of Wacky Racers that is just these two, like, racing dual discs and just, like, yelling at each other. I want that, damn it. Give it to me, Yu-Gi-Oh! And then we get the Kusanagi Yusaku backstory stuff. And again, we should have gotten this a long time ago, or we could have just not gotten it at all. It's really not that important. You could have just had a one-moment line of, we were both suffering, so we decided to work together. But no, they give us a backstory, and I actually really liked it. First up, the way it's brought to us is really clever. So if you noticed, the flashback doesn't start until after Kusanagi gets to the point of saying that my brother came home. It starts there for a very certain reason, because the other parts are in the past. And though that's horrible and terrifying, the idea of your brother being kidnapped and you and your family driving yourself crazy looking for him, the fact of the matter is they found him. That terror was resolved. But the real thing that got to Kusanagi happened when his brother came home, and that was he couldn't help his brother. His brother wouldn't get better. His brother couldn't, like, communicate, basically just became a vegetable and was a lunatic. Okay, maybe that's the wrong word, but you get what I'm saying. And that really horrified Kusanagi, because as they sort of cleverly showed off, Kusanagi was probably the kind of person who was forceful and wanted to always believe he could do what needed to be done. Remember, they say that Kusanagi was into sports. A common archetype with older brother characters who are into sports is that they look out for the younger brother. They try to do what's right and help people, and sports obviously creates a mindset of wanting to push through and persevere, and he couldn't. He couldn't do anything to help his brother. The only thing he could do was basically hack and look for answers. That's why they showed that picture of the bad guys as being like this almost sort of larger-than-life scientists who are just in control of everything. A common metaphor of that is the idea of people being disenfranchised, of being powerless and weak, while there are those at the top who they wish they could stop. And that is what we got here. We saw that Kusanagi changed the entire course of his life, changed everything he was interested in, all just to save his brother. And that's a really powerful moment, and I love that it wasn't just spoon-fed and they included visual metaphor and some actually really neat little animation tricks. It really was a great scene. And then we get him going into Vrains, and we get apparently the worst thing Hanoi could do to you is delete you, your account. Whatever. And then we get the first meeting of him and Yusaku. And at first I thought it was weird they weren't showing Yusaku's eyes. Then it hit me. This is actually clever. You see, they don't reveal Yusaku's eyes until the moment where he saves Kusanagi. Because remember, this is all in Kusanagi's backstory. But that's the moment that Kusanagi realizes that who Yusaku is and what's this guy about. He didn't know who he was when he was just unknown. He didn't know he was trying to fight back. He was trying to do anything. But in that moment, when Yusaku rushes in to save him and takes on Hanoi, that's when he truly sees who this guy is and what he's about. It's also a nice little throwback, because remember, when Revolver's face wasn't shown to us, they hid it until that moment when we see him and he reveals what he's truly about. He tells us what his goals are, what his feelings are, and you get that sort of sense of who he really is. I don't know if it's intentionally made to be similar, but it's a nice little callback and a great idea if it is to show hero and villain. Then you get on to the duel, and I love the duel. First up, Yusaku actually used good cards. I get so sick of all these cybursts with paragraph-long effects that amount to something very underwhelming. No, he used a couple cards that legitimately had things that were useful, and I really enjoyed that. For starters, someone had actually told me earlier today that he used Gaia Saber in the episode, so I actually kind of got worried. I don't know why I thought this. I thought he was going to use World Chalice, and I said to myself, if he ruins my World Chalice with his bad dueling, I don't know what I'm going to do. But fortunately, he didn't, and I also sort of like the fact I'm pretty certain all three of the cards he used were in the Link Strike starter deck, so that's a nice little nod. And you could also sort of say it that, well, his deck started like the real world one we got, and then as he added more Cyberse cards to it, it got crazier and crazier. A nice little thing. Though, does this create a sort of continuity error? Because he uses Photon Thrasher, cards that are only supposed to be usable for Kaito, but he has one. Don't get me wrong, I love Photon Thrasher. It's a great card. Seeing it here was awesome. But I'm pretty certain the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that people with magic are the only people who can use their own cards. So does that mean at some point in the timeline they get made into real cards so everyone can use them? Do they just lose their importance? Did Yusaku make the card fake because he's in the computer world and computer bullshit? Are the universes still separated, so, like, it doesn't really matter, in which case, where does an Xyz support card come from? It opens a lot of things that I don't even really care about, but I figure I would bring up for a minute, because it was cute to see him do something. And also, like, does that mean Photon Thrasher is the first card not from an original Yu-Gi-Oh! To actually sort of be relevant for one character and then appear for another? I'm pretty certain Marauding Captain was used once or twice in the original, and there's been a couple stuff pop up here and there, but I think this is the first time something not from the original has been used by by someone else, which is awesome. I want this universe to feel more like one world where all this stuff is happening on the same planet. And then, of course, what does he summon? Gaia Saber. A Link monster that was useful when it came out. It's kind of worked its way out of the meta, but I loved this card in World Chalice. It had great Link markers for when you were setting up plays. It had good attacks, so that way you didn't have to, like, leave, like, say, a Link Spider with your Firewall on board. It's actually a good card. I kind of hope one day that someone finds another use for it. And honestly, it feels more like a starter deck card than something that warranted being a secret rare. Yeah, that's that. And how does Yusaku win the duel? Forbidden Lance, baby! For those of you who don't remember, because this card hasn't been relevant for a red hot minute, there was a time when Forbidden Lance was one of the most played cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! This was a 3-of staple in most decks. Why? Because A, that 800 stat reduction that you could actually use during the damage step really came in handy. But also, making whatever you wanted spell or trap immune was really useful. Things like battle traps, like Mirror Force, Sakuretsu Armor, D-Prison were relevant for a very long time in this game. Then you also had stuff like Compulse, Book of Moon, Bottomless Trap Hole that could really screw a turn up. Having a quick play that you could just use whenever really saved a lot of combo plays and really helped a lot of people out. And also, hey, being able to ruin your opponent's shenanigans. I've had a lot of mass changes that just sort of whiffed because my opponent used that lance on my Shadow Mist. So yeah, that was just a nice thing to see Yusaku actually use good cards and do good things with them. So all in all, I liked this, and I liked the idea that Kusanagi kind of maybe showed a bit of a selfishness for a minute there. He was like, this is the thing I need. This is the guy I must use. He can help me get my revenge. I liked it. I really did. It was creative. It had effort put into it. It had storytelling. These are things I want out of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I liked it quite a bit. And also just competent dueling. But what did you think? In the comment section below, give me your thoughts on this episode and if you like where things are going and if you want more content like this in the show. As for the TCG question of the week, Shadows of Valhalla released this Friday. Are you just in it for the reprints, that Ash Blossom, that invoked stuff? Or are you interested in, like, the Valkyrie, the Time Maidens, the Ninjas? I personally have no real interest or need for this set, but I want to know if anyone is out there wants to play Valkyries, because they look cool, but their level restrictions really screw the deck up a lot. But tell me about that below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and let's see if they can actually pull off the Cyberse deck backstory next.